What if your child was dying and there were no hospitals? What if your country was torn by war and the wounded were left on the streets? What if the only future for a girl was marriage, with no hope of education or a voice of her own? For millions, this was a reality. But sometimes a woman in a position of power decided to act. We hear about kings and their wars. We hear about the glamour and the scandals of royal courts. We rarely hear about the quiet, determined work of queens who use their influence not for jewels or parties, but to build, to heal, and to educate. These are their stories. Number 17, what if your crown was your only weapon? A queen died in exile with just over $2,000 to her name. She had once been the celebrated White Rose of Hungary. She spent decades running a charity for her people from a small home in Spain. Her work was funded by selling the few remaining royal jewels she had managed to save. This was the life of Queen Geraldine of Albania. Her reign was one of the shortest in European history. It lasted just 359 days, but her work for the Albanian people lasted over 60 years. Geraldine was born Countess Geraldine Aponi Danagi Aponi in 1915 in Budapest, Hungary. Her family was ancient nobility, but they lost their fortune after the fall of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. She grew up in relative poverty. She worked as a stenographer. She sold postcards at the Budapest National Museum to support her family. This early experience with hardship shaped her entire life. She understood what it was like to struggle. In 1937, her life changed forever. King Zog I of Albania saw her photograph. He was looking for a European noble bride to legitimize his new monarchy. He invited her to Tirana. They fell in love. They married in April 1938. She was 22. He was 42. For a brief moment, she was the queen of a small, poor, but hopeful nation. She immediately took to her role. She established the Albanian Red Cross. She focused on improving the country's dismal health care. Albania in the 1930s had one of the highest infant mortality rates in Europe. Hospitals were few and poorly equipped. Geraldine used her royal patronage to raise funds for new clinics and maternity wards. She championed nursing education. She wanted to create a system where Albanian women could care for their own communities. She visited the poor. She listened to their problems. She was not a distant figure. She was seen as a mother to the nation. Her most significant project was the creation of a national foundation to help poor mothers and children. This foundation provided food, clothing, and basic medical supplies. It was a direct intervention in a cycle of poverty and disease. She personally oversaw its administration. She used her own funds and connections to get it started. Then, just 2 days after she gave birth to her son, Crown Prince Leka, everything fell apart. In April 1939, Italy invaded Albania. Zog and Geraldine were forced to flee. They escaped with the newborn prince, crossing the mountains into Greece with barely anything. Her reign was over, but her work was not. For the rest of her life, in exile in Greece, Egypt, France, Spain, and finally South Africa, Geraldine was the queen of a country that no longer existed as a monarchy. She could have faded into obscurity. She could have lived a quiet life. She refused. She became the heart of the Albanian government in exile. While King Zog focused on political maneuvering, Queen Geraldine focused on the people. She used her name and her story to keep the plight of Albania in the international eye. She gave interviews. She wrote letters. She spoke at events. She never stopped being the queen. Her main charitable effort was a relief fund for Albanian refugees. Thousands had fled the country. They were scattered across Europe and America, often with nothing. Geraldine's fund provided financial assistance, helped them find housing and jobs, and preserved their cultural identity. She ran this operation on a shoestring budget. She sold her jewelry piece by piece. A diamond bracelet would pay for a family's rent for a year. A pearl necklace would fund scholarships for refugee children. She lived simply. She never bought new clothes. She poured every spare penny into her work. Her home in Madrid was an unofficial Albanian embassy and community center. It was a place where refugees could come for help, for a meal, or just to speak their own language. She was their link to the home they had lost. She never saw Albania again until 2002, just months before her death. The communist regime that had replaced the monarchy had fallen. She was allowed to return. She was old and frail, but she came back. She died in Tirana, the city where she had been queen for just 1 year. Her legacy was not in palaces or monuments. It was in the lives she touched, the children she helped educate, the families she helped feed. For over 60 years, with no country and no throne, she showed what it meant to be a queen. Number 16, could a princess find her true calling as a nun? She was a great-granddaughter of Queen Victoria. She was a princess of Romania. She ended her life as an Orthodox nun in a monastery she founded in Pennsylvania. She used her royal connections to save hundreds from persecution. Her monastery became a spiritual center for her displaced people. Princess Ileana of Romania was born in 1909. She was the daughter of Queen Marie of Romania. She grew up in a world of palaces and privilege, but she was also raised with a strong sense of duty. Her mother, Queen Marie, was a famous WWI nurse. Ileana learned from her that royalty meant service. From a young age, she was involved in charitable work. She was a trained nurse. She was active in the Romanian Girl Guides movement. She worked with the MCA. She had a particular passion for guiding and scouting. She saw it as a way to build character and a sense of community among young people. In 1931, she married Archduke Anton of Austria, Prince of Tuscany. She moved to a castle near Vienna. Even as an archduchess in Austria, she never forgot Romania. She established a relief organization for Romanian students and workers living in Austria. During the Second World War, her life changed dramatically. Romania was caught between powerful forces. After a political upheaval in 1940, Ileana and her family were forced into exile. They eventually returned to Romania in 1944. She found her country devastated by war. She set up a small hospital at their castle in Bran, the place often associated with Dracula. She named it the Hospital of the Queen's Heart in memory of her mother. She worked there herself as a nurse. She treated wounded soldiers and civilians, regardless of which side they were on. She used her royal connections to get scarce medical supplies. She drove a truck herself to deliver them. She faced down soldiers to protect her patients. But a new threat was rising. The communists were taking over Romania. In 1948, the royal family was forced to abdicate and leave the country within hours. Ileana was exiled once again. This time, it was for good. She eventually settled in the United States in 1950. She had 6 children and very little money. She had to start over. She supported her family by writing books and lecturing about her life and her country. She shared the story of Romania with the world, a country now hidden behind the Iron Curtain. Her faith had always been the center of her life. In her lectures, she spoke about the power of Orthodox Christianity. She saw a need for an English-language Orthodox monastery in America. She wanted to create a place of prayer and refuge. In 1961, her children were grown. She decided to follow a lifelong calling. She became a nun. She took the name Mother Alexandra. She sold the few valuables she had left. She used the money, along with donations from supporters, to buy a piece of land in Elwood City, Pennsylvania. There, she founded the Orthodox Monastery of the Transfiguration. She did the physical labor herself. She helped clear the land. She painted. She cooked. She built a spiritual home for a new generation of American Orthodox Christians. It was also a cultural sanctuary for Romanian Americans. It kept their faith and traditions alive. The monastery grew. It became a well-known center for Orthodox spirituality in the United States. Mother Alexandra served as its abbess for many years. She wrote books on the spiritual life. She counseled countless people. She never returned to Romania. She died in 1991, just after the fall of communism. Her legacy is not a political one. It is a spiritual one. She used her royal background and her personal faith to build something lasting. The princess who became a nurse, then a refugee, found her final and most important role as Mother Alexandra. She created a place of peace that continues to serve people today. Number 15, how do you fight for women who are forced to hide their faces? She was one of the first Indian royal women to appear in public without a veil. She established a school for girls in a society where female education was radical. She traveled to England to meet Queen Victoria and plead for more support for women's rights in India. Maharani Sunity Devi of Cooch, Behar was a pioneer. She was born in 1864, the daughter of the famous Brahmo Samaj religious reformer Keshub Chandra Sen. The Brahmo Samaj was a progressive movement that advocated for social reform, including the abolition of child marriage and the promotion of women's education. And Sunity Devi was raised with these ideals. It was an education that would define her life's work. At the age of 13, she was married to the Maharaja of Cooch Behar, Nrpendra Narayan. Cooch Behar was a princely state in Bengal. The royal court was deeply traditional. Women of the court practiced purdah, the custom of remaining secluded and veiled from public view. Sunity Devi refused to accept this. She had been raised to believe in a woman's right to participate in society. With the support of her husband, who was also a progressive thinker, she challenged the custom. She began to appear in public without a veil. This was a shocking act. It was seen as a breach of tradition, but she persisted. She wanted to set an example. She believed that purdah was holding women back. Her most important contribution was in education. In 1881, she founded the Sunity College. It started as a school for girls. She used her own money and influence to get it built. She designed the curriculum herself. It offered a modern education, including subjects like English, science, and the arts. This was revolutionary at the time. Most girls received no formal education at all. The school faced opposition. Traditionalists were against it. But Sunity Devi was determined. She went door to door to persuade families to send their daughters to her school. The school grew. It later became a college. It still exists today as the Sunity Academy. It has educated thousands of girls over the decades. Sunity Devi was also a writer and an activist. She wrote an autobiography called The Autobiography of an Indian Princess. It was one of the first books of its kind, giving a voice to the experiences of a royal Indian woman. She and her husband traveled to London in 1887 for Queen Victoria's Golden Jubilee. Sunity Devi used the opportunity to speak with British officials and society figures about the need for women's education in India. She was a graceful and intelligent ambassador for her cause. She received the Order of the Crown of India, a recognition of her status and work. Beyond her school, she was involved in numerous other charitable activities. She financed scholarships for girls. She supported hospitals. She was the president of the state council and took an active role in the administration of Cooch Behar, especially after her husband's death. She lost her husband and two of her sons. She faced personal tragedy, but she never stopped working. She moved to the British Hill Station of Darjeeling and continued her philanthropic work there. She founded a vocational training center for women. She wanted to give them skills to earn their own living. Sunity Devi died in 1932. She had lived through a period of immense change in India. She was a bridge between the old world and the new. By challenging purdah and championing education, she opened doors for generations of women. Her work was not just about charity, it was about empowerment. She believed that an educated woman could change her family, her community, and her country. Number 14, could a queen's love for God build an empire's soul? She built one of the most beautiful mosque complexes in the world. Her architectural projects define the skyline of a great imperial capital. She funded a network of schools and religious colleges that became centers of learning. Her name was almost erased from history by later conquerors. Goharshad was a queen of the Timurid Empire in the 15th century. She was not a ruler in her own right. She was the wife of Shah Rukh, the son of the great conqueror Timur. But Goharshad was a political and cultural power in her own right. While her husband consolidated the empire, she became its chief architectural patron. Her work shaped the cultural identity of the Timurid Renaissance. She was born around 1379. She was a noblewoman, the daughter of a powerful aristocrat. She married Shah Rukh in 1394. After Timur's death in 1405, the empire was unstable. Shah Rukh eventually secured power and made the city of Herat in modern-day Afghanistan his capital. Herat became the glittering center of the Timurid world, and Goharshad was the driving force behind its transformation. Her most famous project is the Goharshad Mosque in Mashhad, Iran. It was completed in 1418. It is still considered one of the masterpieces of Islamic architecture. It is a vast complex with a grand courtyard, four massive iwans, vaulted halls, and towering minarets covered in brilliant blue tiles. But this was not just a building. It was a public institution. It was part of the shrine complex of the Imam Reza, one of the holiest sites for Shia Muslims. By building this mosque, Goharshad was performing an act of immense piety. She was also making a powerful political statement. She was cementing the Timurid dynasty's legitimacy as patrons of the faith. The mosque provided a space for thousands to pray. Its construction employed hundreds of artisans and laborers. The funds for its perpetual upkeep, an endowment called a waqf, supported the religious scholars and staff who worked there. In Herat, her capital, she sponsored an even more ambitious project. She funded the construction of a large complex that included a madrasa, a college for religious and scientific study, and a musalla, a large outdoor prayer space. This complex was renowned for its beauty. The madrasa was a center of learning. It attracted scholars, poets, and artists from across the empire. It housed a large library. It offered free education to its students. This was an investment in the intellectual capital of the empire. Goharshad's patronage was not limited to grand buildings. She supported calligraphers, painters, and poets. The Herat school of miniature painting flourished under her support. She understood that a great empire needed not just military power, but a strong cultural and spiritual heart. Her projects were designed to provide that. She was also politically astute. She had a strong influence on her husband's policies. She promoted her sons to positions of power. She was a key figure at the royal court for over 40 years. Her end was tragic. After her husband's death in 1447, the empire was once again plunged into civil war. Goharshad, now an old woman in her late 70s, was caught in the power struggles between her own grandsons. In 1457, one of them, Abu Sa'id Mirza, saw her as a threat. He ordered her execution. She was put to death. Her tomb is in Herat, next to the minarets of the madrasa she built. Much of her great complex in Herat was destroyed in the 19th century. But the Goharshad Mosque in Mashhad still stands. Millions of pilgrims visit it every year. They walk through the courtyards she funded. They pray under the dome she raised. Her name lives on not in a royal title, but in the stone and tile and faith she left behind. Number 13, can a queen wash the feet of the poor and still keep her power? She founded the first public hospital in London. She built public baths for the citizens of the city. She would personally wash the feet of lepers and care for them. She was a queen of England who came from Scotland, a foreign bride who won the hearts of her new people through charity. Matilda of Scotland, also known as Good Queen Maud, was the wife of King Henry I of England. She lived in the early 12th century. Her life was a bridge between the old Anglo-Saxon world and the new Norman one. Her charity was a way of healing the wounds of a conquered nation. She was born Edith of Scotland around 1080. Her father was King Malcolm III of Scotland. Her mother was Saint Margaret of Scotland. Margaret was an Anglo-Saxon princess who had fled to Scotland after the Norman conquest of England in 1066. Matilda was raised in a monastery in England. She was highly educated. She was also deeply religious, influenced by her saintly mother. In 1100, she married Henry I. He was the son of William the Conqueror. The marriage was a brilliant political move. It united the new Norman dynasty with the old Anglo-Saxon royal line. It brought peace and stability. To mark her new role as Queen of England, her name was changed from Edith to the more Norman-sounding Matilda. But Matilda was more than a political pawn. She immediately began a program of public works and charity that was unprecedented for a queen. Her faith was practical. She believed in serving the poor and the sick directly. One of her most famous acts was her care for lepers. Leprosy was a terrifying disease in the Middle Ages. Sufferers were outcasts. They were forced to live apart from society. Matilda showed them compassion. Chroniclers of the time wrote that she would invite lepers into her private chambers at the palace. She would wash their feet, she would kiss their sores, she would serve them food and give them money. When her brother criticized her for this, worried she might catch the disease, she said she was kissing the feet of Christ himself. In 1101, she founded the Holy Trinity Priory at Aldgate in London. This was a major religious house, but her focus was often on more direct social needs. She founded St. Giles in the Fields, a leper hospital. This was a radical act of public health. It provided a place for lepers to live and receive care. It was a place of refuge and dignity for the most despised people in society. It was funded by an endowment from the Queen. She also cared for the ordinary people of London. She commissioned the construction of public bathhouses, or baths, with a clean water supply. This was a major contribution to public sanitation at a time when hygiene was poor and disease was rampant. She was also a patron of infrastructure. She is credited with ordering the construction of the first arched bridge in England at Stratford-le-Bow over the River Lea. This improved transportation and trade. She built roads. She sponsored the arts. She commissioned a biography of her mother, Saint Margaret. She acted as regent, ruling England when her husband was away in Normandy. She was a capable administrator. She issued her own charters. She presided over the king's council. She was respected for her intelligence and her piety. She died in 1118 at the age of about 38. She was mourned by the people of England. They called her Good Queen Maud. They remembered her not for her royal glamour, but for her kindness. Her work was a powerful statement. She showed that a queen's duty was not just to her husband or her dynasty, but to her people, especially the poorest and most vulnerable among them. The hospital she founded continued its work for centuries. Her legacy was in the clean water, the safe bridges, and the care she showed to those no one else would touch. Number 12, how do you run a kingdom from a hospital bed? She founded the first modern nursing school in her country. She personally funded and managed a foundation that supported hundreds of social projects, from children's homes to soup kitchens. She did much of this while suffering from chronic illness that often left her bedridden. Queen Sophia of Sweden was a queen consort of two countries, Sweden and Norway. She was a quiet, devout woman who used her position and her personal fortune to create a lasting legacy in social welfare and healthcare. She was born Princess Sophia of Nassau in 1836. She grew up in a German principality. She received a thorough education. She was intelligent, serious, and deeply religious. In 1857, she married the future King Oscar II of Sweden and Norway. Life at the Swedish court was a challenge. It was formal and rigid. Sophia was naturally shy. Her health was also fragile. She suffered from back problems and other ailments throughout her life, but she was determined to fulfill her duties as queen. When she became queen in 1872, she focused her attention on charity and social reform. She was horrified by the state of medical care in Sweden. Nursing was not a respected profession. It was done by untrained women, often of low social standing. Hospitals were often dirty and dangerous. Sophia had been inspired by Florence Nightingale's work in Britain. She wanted to bring the same professional standards to Sweden. In 1884, she founded the Sofiahemmet, which means Sophia's home. This was not just a hospital, it was a nursing school. She was involved in every detail. She helped develop the curriculum. She insisted on high standards of hygiene and patient care. She wanted to create a new kind of nurse, educated, respected, and dedicated. The nurses who trained at Sofiahemmet were called Sophia Sisters. They wore a distinctive uniform. They became a symbol of modern professional nursing in Sweden. The Sofiahemmet was funded directly by the Queen and King. It was her personal project. She visited it often. She knew the staff and students by name. Even when she was too ill to leave her bed, she managed the affairs of the hospital from her rooms in the palace. She would read reports, approve budgets, and write letters of instruction. Her work did not stop there. She and her husband established a foundation to support charitable causes across the country. Through this foundation, she supported orphanages, homes for the elderly, and organizations that help the poor. She was particularly interested in animal welfare and was a patron of several animal protection societies. She was also a force for peace. She had a strong influence on her husband. In 1905, the union between Sweden and Norway was dissolving. It was a tense time. There was talk of war. Queen Sophia worked behind the scenes to encourage a peaceful separation. She believed a war between the two Scandinavian peoples would be a disaster. Her calm influence helped to ensure that Norway gained its independence without bloodshed. She was a devoted mother and a prolific writer. She translated books. She wrote poetry. She kept detailed diaries. Her faith was her guide in everything she did. She saw her royal position as a responsibility given to her by God, a tool to be used for the good of others. And Queen Sophia died in 1913. The Sophiahemmet continues to be one of Sweden's leading private hospitals and nursing schools. The Sophia sisters set a new standard for a profession. Her legacy is not in grand monuments. It is in the generations of nurses she trained and the culture of care she helped to build. She showed that even from a position of physical weakness, a queen could be a source of immense strength and positive change. Number 11. Can a queen create a global movement with a single letter? She created an international fund that has raised hundreds of millions of dollars for disaster relief and medical aid. This fund, bearing her name, operates under the banner of the International Red Cross. She did this as the empress of a nation that was just beginning to open up to the rest of the world. Empress Shokin of Japan was the wife of Emperor Meiji. She lived from 1849 to 1914. This was a period of incredible transformation for Japan. The country moved from a feudal society to a modern industrial power. Empress Shokin played a quiet but crucial role in this change, especially in the areas of charity and women's roles. She was born Masako Ichijo. She was the daughter of a high-ranking court noble. She was educated in the classical Japanese and Chinese arts. She learned poetry, calligraphy, and music. In 1869, she married Emperor Meiji. As empress, she was given the name Haruko, which was later changed to Shokin after her death. In the early years of the Meiji era, the empress's role was very traditional and secluded. She was not seen in public. But Emperor Meiji wanted Japan to learn from the West. He encouraged his wife to take on a more public and charitable role, similar to that of European queens. And Empress Shokin embraced this new responsibility. She became a strong advocate for women's education. At the time, education for girls was not a priority. The Empress believed that if Japan was to become a modern nation, its women must be educated. She was a patron of the Peeresses School, an institution for the daughters of the nobility. She often visited the school and encouraged the students. Her support helped to make female education more socially acceptable. Her greatest legacy, however, is in the field of humanitarian aid. During the First Sino-Japanese War in 1894 to 1895, the Empress was deeply concerned about the welfare of wounded soldiers. She was an early supporter of the Japanese Red Cross Society. She visited Red Cross hospitals. She personally made bandages for the troops. She realized that the Red Cross needed a stable source of funding, especially for its peacetime activities and international work. In 1912, she made a historic decision. She donated 100,000 yen from her personal privy purse to the International Red Cross. This was an enormous sum of money at the time, equivalent to millions of dollars today. She made this donation with a specific vision. She wanted to create a permanent international fund. The interest from this fund would be used for relief work in time of peace. It would support projects that helped victims of natural disasters, famines, and epidemics around the world. This became known as the Empress Shokin Fund. It was the first international fund of its kind within the Red Cross movement. After her death, the Japanese government and the Red Cross Society continued to contribute to it. The fund has grown substantially over the last century. Every year, On the anniversary of her death, the fund gives out grants to Red Cross and Red Crescent societies around the world. These grants have supported projects in over 160 countries. They have funded things like blood banks in Africa, disaster preparedness training in Southeast Asia, and first aid programs in Latin America. The Empress Shokin Fund is a remarkable example of philanthropic foresight. She did not just give a one-time donation. She created a sustainable system for providing aid that has lasted for more than 100 years. It has helped millions of people she would never meet in countries she would never visit. Where Empress Shokin was a quiet and dignified figure. She rarely spoke in public, but her actions spoke volumes. She helped to redefine the role of the Empress in modern Japan. She championed education for women. And with one single generous act, she created a global legacy of compassion that continues to save lives and reduce suffering to this day. Number 10, what does it take for a queen to become a soldier? She wore a nurse's uniform and worked near the front lines of a brutal war. She rode her horse through bombed-out villages to deliver food and medicine. She faced down an enemy general to protect her people. She became a symbol of her nation's will to survive. Queen Marie of Romania was one of the most remarkable royal figures of the 20th century. She was a granddaughter of both Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom and Tsar Alexander II of Russia. She married Crown Prince Ferdinand of Romania in 1893. She was beautiful, intelligent, and fiercely independent. When she first came to Romania, she was an outsider. The court was stiff and political, but she fell in love with her adopted country. She learned the language. She embraced the culture. She became more Romanian than the Romanians. Her true character was revealed during the First World War. In 1916, Romania entered the war on the side of the Allies. The country was quickly overrun by German and Austro-Hungarian forces. The royal family and the government were forced to retreat to the city of Iasi in the small, unoccupied part of the country. It was a time of national disaster. The army was in retreat. There was a catastrophic typhus epidemic. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers and civilians were dying from disease and starvation. The country was on the brink of collapse. In this moment of crisis, Queen Marie became the nation's leader. While her husband, now King Ferdinand, dealt with the military and political situation, Marie took charge of the humanitarian effort. She refused to be a ceremonial queen, safe behind palace walls. She put on the white uniform of a Red Cross nurse and went to work. Every day she visited the military hospitals. They were overcrowded and filthy. Wounded and dying men lay on the floors. There were not enough doctors, nurses, or medicine. Marie was fearless. She went into the typhus wards where the risk of infection was highest. She held the hands of dying soldiers. She gave them water. She spoke words of comfort. She was not afraid of the disease or the suffering. Her presence gave the men hope. They called her Mama Regina, the Mother Queen. She organized field hospitals. She set up soup kitchens. She raised money for medical supplies. She used her royal connections in Britain and Russia to plead for aid. When supplies arrived, she personally supervised their distribution. She would drive or ride her horse for hours to remote villages to make sure the aid reached the people who needed it most. There is a famous story about her encounter with a German general. He told her that her work in the hospitals was pointless, that her people were doomed. She looked him in the eye and said, "A queen of Romania never gives up." After the war, her work was not done. Romania was on the victorious side, but it needed to secure its territorial gains at the Paris Peace Conference in 1919. The Romanian delegation was struggling to be heard. The Prime Minister asked the king to send Queen Marie. She went to Paris and London. She was a diplomatic sensation. The world had heard stories of the Soldier Queen. She used her charm, her intelligence, and her royal connections to her advantage. She had personal meetings with President Woodrow Wilson of the United States, Prime Minister Georges Clemenceau of France, and Prime Minister David Lloyd George of Britain. She argued passionately for Romania's cause. She helped to secure the international recognition of Greater Romania. In her later years, she continued her charitable work. She supported the arts and the church. She wrote books. She remained a beloved figure. Queen Marie died in 1938. She had transformed the role of a queen consort. She was not just a wife or a mother. She was a leader, a nurse, a diplomat, and the heart of her nation in its darkest hour. Her legacy was the survival and unity of the country she had adopted as her own. Number 9, can you fight a disease with a milk carton? She founded the first tuberculosis sanatoriums in her country. She created a national network of clinics to fight infant mortality. She used her royal patronage to bring modern medicine to a poor and largely rural nation. She did this while her own monarchy was crumbling around her. Queen Amelie of Portugal was the last queen of her country. She was born in 1865 in London. She was Princess Amelie of Orleans, a member of the exiled French royal family. In 1886, she married the future King Carlos I of Portugal. She arrived in a country facing serious social and political problems. Portugal was one of the poorest countries in Western Europe. It had high rates of disease and illiteracy. The monarchy itself was becoming increasingly unpopular. Amelie was a tall, elegant, and energetic woman. She was determined to use her position to make a difference. She was particularly concerned about public health. Two of the biggest killers in Portugal at the time were tuberculosis and infant mortality. Tuberculosis, the White Plague, was rampant. There was no cure. The only effective treatment was rest, fresh air, and good nutrition in a specialized hospital called a sanatorium. But there were no sanatoriums in Portugal. In 1899, Queen Amelie founded the National Assistance for the Tuberculosis Institute. This was a major undertaking. She used her personal funds, she organized fundraising campaigns, she persuaded wealthy families to donate. The Institute's first project was to build a network of sanatoriums across the country. These provided free care for the poor. It was a revolutionary step for public health in Portugal. She also tackled the problem of infant mortality. She was a devoted mother herself. She was horrified by the number of babies who died from preventable diseases and malnutrition. She established a system of milk dispensaries called Gout's Delight Drops of Milk. These clinics provided sterilized milk, medical checkups, and hygiene education for poor mothers. It was a simple, practical idea that saved thousands of lives. She also founded the National Coach Museum in Lisbon. She gathered a collection of historic royal coaches that were sitting in storage. She turned them into a public museum. It seems like a minor project compared to her health work, but it was important. It preserved a piece of Portuguese heritage. And the museum's income helped to fund her other charities. It is still one of Lisbon's most popular museums today. She was also a trained nurse. She was one of the first women in Portugal to get a nursing diploma. When a major earthquake and tsunami hit the Azores Islands, she organized the relief effort. But her good works could not save the monarchy. The political situation grew worse. In 1908, a terrible tragedy struck. King Carlos and their eldest son, Luis Felipe, were assassinated in the streets of Lisbon. Queen Amelie was in the carriage with them. She tried to defend them with a bouquet of flowers, the only thing she had. Her younger son, Manuel, became king. But his reign was short. In 1910, a revolution overthrew the monarchy. The royal family was forced into exile. Queen Amelie spent the rest of her life in France. She never returned to Portugal. But she never stopped working for the Portuguese people. During the First World War, she volunteered as a nurse in French hospitals, treating wounded soldiers, including many Portuguese. She continued to support her charities from afar. She died in 1951, having spent more than 40 years in exile. She was buried in the Royal Pantheon in Lisbon. She is remembered in Portugal, not just as the last queen, but as a great humanitarian. The hospital she founded, the clinic she started, the lives she saved. That was her true kingdom. For number 8, what if a queen gave away her own jewels? She sold her personal collection of jewelry and donated the proceeds, a sum of millions of dollars, to charity. She insisted on a simple, down-to-earth lifestyle, often riding her bicycle around town. She used her annual state allowance to create funds that supported social and cultural projects for decades. Queen Juliana of the Netherlands reigned from 1948 to 1980. She was a monarch who broke the mold. She disliked the formality and pomp of royalty. She wanted to be close to her people. Her philanthropy was not about grand gestures, but about practical, long-term support for her community. Juliana was born in 1909, the only child of Queen Wilhelmina. She was raised to be a different kind of monarch. She attended a regular school. She went to university. She wanted to understand the lives of ordinary people. During World War II, she and her children lived in exile in Canada while her husband and mother remained in London with the government in exile. This experience further strengthened her connection to ordinary life. She became queen in 1948. From the beginning, she set a new tone for the monarchy. She was known for her informal style. She would stop to chat with people on the street. She sent her children to public schools. She was often seen riding her bicycle or doing her own shopping. Her approach to charity was just as practical. She believed in using her resources to empower others. One of her most significant acts came in 1949, shortly after she took the throne. A national committee had raised a huge sum of money to give her as a national gift. Instead of accepting it for personal use, she designated that the money should form the Queen Juliana Welfare Fund. This fund, which still exists today as the Oranje Fonds Orange Fund, became a major source of support for thousands of social initiatives across the Netherlands. It gives grants to projects related to social cohesion, community building, and helping vulnerable groups. It was a way of turning a one-time gift into a perpetual source of good. She did this again on her silver wedding anniversary in 1962. A national collection was taken up. She directed the money to a fund for disabled people. On her 70th birthday, she used the gift money to establish a fund for children. But her most famous act of personal giving was the sale of her jewels. Over the years, she had inherited and received a vast collection of jewelry. She felt it was an unnecessary extravagance. She systematically sold off many pieces. The proceeds went to her charitable funds. It was a quiet act, done without fanfare. The total amount raised was enormous, estimated to be many millions of dollars. She was, in effect, liquidating her personal assets for the public good. She was also very hands-on in times of crisis. In 1953, the Netherlands was hit by a massive flood. It was one of the worst natural disasters in the country's history. Queen Juliana immediately went to the flooded areas. She wore rubber boots and an old coat. She waded through the mud. She comforted victims. She helped distribute food and blankets. Her presence showed a deep and genuine solidarity with her people. She reigned for 32 years. In 1980, on her 71st birthday, she abdicated the throne in favor of her daughter, Beatrix. She chose to step down and return to a more private life. Queen Juliana changed the Dutch monarchy. She made it more human, more accessible, and more focused on social responsibility. Her legacy is not just in the money she gave, but in the example she set. She showed that real power lies not in crowns and jewels, but in compassion and service. Number 7, could a queen's piety also be her politics? She was a deeply conservative empress who opposed many modernizing reforms, yet she was also one of the most prolific builders of churches in her nation's history. She used her immense wealth and power to fund the construction and restoration of dozens of religious sites, creating a legacy of faith written in stone. Empress Sunity of Ethiopia ruled from 1916 to 1930. She was the first woman to be the head of an internationally recognized state in Africa in the 19th and 20th centuries. Her reign was a time of intense political struggle between conservative forces who supported her and progressive modernizers led by her regent and heir, Tafari Makonnen, the future Emperor Haile Selassie. Sunity was the daughter of Emperor Menelik II, one of Ethiopia's greatest rulers. She was a devout Orthodox Christian. Her faith was the guiding principle of her life. When she came to the throne, she saw her primary role as the defender of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church. While the modernizers focused on building roads, secular schools, and a modern army, Sunity focused on what she believed was the soul of the nation, its faith. She embarked on a massive program of religious patronage. She used her own funds to build new churches throughout the country. One of the most famous is the Sebedegetezaman Bete Denagil Mariam Monastery near Addis Ababa. She also financed the construction of major churches in the capital city itself. Her work was not just about new construction. She also funded the extensive repair and renovation of many of Ethiopia's ancient churches and monasteries. These sites were the repositories of the nation's history, culture, and religious identity. Many were falling into disrepair. Zewditu's patronage helped to preserve them for future generations. This was not just an act of personal piety. It was also a shrewd political move. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church was a powerful institution. It had immense influence over the people and the nobility. By positioning herself as its great patron, Zewditu strengthened her own political base. She rallied the support of the clergy and the conservative elements of society against the reforms of her regent, Tafari. Her charity was almost entirely directed through the church. She endowed monasteries with land. This provided them with a source of income to support their monks and their charitable work, which often included feeding the poor and providing basic education. She donated lavish religious items to churches, gold and silver crosses, embroidered vestments, and illuminated manuscripts. She lived a relatively austere personal life. She spent long hours in prayer and fasting. She saw her role as empress as a spiritual duty. Her reign was marked by this constant tension between her vision of a traditional faith-based society and Tafari's vision of a modern centralized state. In the end, the forces of modernization won out. Zewditu died in 1930 under circumstances that are still debated by historians. Her regent, Tafari, then ascended the throne as Emperor Haile Selassie. It is easy to see Empress Zewditu as a figure who resisted progress. But her legacy is more complex. Her philanthropic work had a profound and lasting impact. The churches she built are still active centers of worship. The monasteries she supported continue to be places of learning and prayer. She preserved a vital part of Ethiopia's cultural and spiritual heritage. Her reign shows that philanthropy is not always about social reform in the modern sense. For Zewditu, the greatest act of charity she could perform was to strengthen the foundations of her people's faith. Number 6, how do you help your people when you're an enemy alien? She was born a German princess. She became the queen of a country that would later fight 2 world wars against Germany. Despite facing suspicion and hostility, she dedicated her life to her new country, founding dozens of hospitals, schools, and charitable institutions. They called her the Angel of Brussels. Queen Elizabeth of Belgium was the wife of King Albert I. She was born Elizabeth in Bavaria in 1876. Her father was a famous ophthalmologist, and she grew up in a household that valued science, art, and social responsibility. This upbringing shaped her entire life. In 1900, she married Prince Albert of Belgium. She became queen in 1909. She was known for her intelligence, her love of music, and her informal style, but her quiet life was shattered in 1914 with the outbreak of the First World War. Germany invaded neutral Belgium. This was a personal and national crisis for Elizabeth. Her own homeland was attacking her adopted country. She never wavered in her loyalty. She stood firmly with Belgium. King Albert took command of the army. He famously declared, "I have a nation, not a population." Queen Elizabeth showed the same spirit. She refused to flee the country. The royal family retreated with the army to a small strip of unoccupied Belgian territory near the coast. There, in the town of Dieppe, Elizabeth set up a major hospital in the Royal Palace Hotel. She was not just a patron. She worked there every day as a nurse. She assisted in the operating room. She comforted the wounded. She was directly involved in the medical care of the soldiers. She used her scientific background to improve medical services. She organized X-ray units for the front lines. She sponsored research into new surgical techniques. She was instrumental in creating a system for training nurses to serve in the military hospitals. Her German birth made her a target for suspicion. Some people whispered that she was a spy, but her tireless work for the Belgian soldiers won the hearts of the people. They saw her sharing their dangers and their suffering. She became a powerful symbol of national resistance. After the war, she continued her philanthropic work. She had a deep interest in public health. She was a major force behind the creation of the Queen Elizabeth Medical Foundation in 1926. This foundation supported scientific research into diseases. She also helped to establish a major cancer research institute. She was also a passionate patron of the arts. She was a talented violinist herself. In 1937, she founded the Queen Elizabeth Music Competition. It was designed to launch the careers of talented young musicians. It quickly became one of the most prestigious music competitions in the world. It still is today. During the Second World War, Belgium was once again occupied by Germany. Elizabeth, now a widow, remained in Brussels. She used her German connections to help her people. She personally intervened to save hundreds of Jewish children from deportation. She pleaded with German officials. She hid children in the royal palace. Her actions saved many lives. After the Second War, she became known for her travels and her unconventional friendships. She visited the Soviet Union, Poland, and China during the Cold War, seeking cultural and scientific exchange. She remained active in her charities and her music competition until her death in 1965 at the age of 89. Queen Elizabeth's life was one of extraordinary challenges. She faced war, occupation, and personal suspicion. But she never lost her commitment to science, art, and humanity. Her legacy is written in the institutions she founded: the hospitals, the research foundations, and the world-renowned music competition. She proved that a queen's loyalty is to people, not to flags. Number 5, could a queen's personal tragedy save a generation of children? She lost 2 of her sons in infancy. This personal heartbreak inspired her to dedicate her life and fortune to improving the health of children. She founded a network of children's hospitals and clinics that transformed pediatric care in her country. And Queen Carola of Saxony was the last queen of this German kingdom. She was born Princess Carola of Vasa in 1833. She was the granddaughter of a deposed king of Sweden. She grew up in exile. In 1853, she married the future King Albert of Saxony. Saxony, with its capital in Dresden, was a prosperous and culturally rich kingdom. But like all industrializing nations in the 19th century, it had serious social problems. Poverty was widespread in the cities. Infant mortality was high. Carola's life was marked by a deep personal sadness. She and Albert had no children who survived. She suffered several miscarriages and stillbirths. This experience of loss gave her a profound empathy for the suffering of sick children and their mothers. She decided to use her position as queen to make a difference. She focused her philanthropic efforts on healthcare, especially for women and children. Her first major project was the establishment of the Carola Stift, a hospital in Dresden founded in 1878. But she soon realized there was a specific need for a hospital dedicated solely to children. In 1894, she oversaw the opening of the Kinderkrankenhaus, the children's hospital in Dresden. This was a state-of-the-art facility for its time. It was designed with the specific needs of children in mind. It had bright, airy wards. It had specialized equipment. It was staffed by doctors and nurses trained in pediatric care. Queen Carola personally funded a significant portion of its construction, but she did more than just write checks. She was actively involved in the management of her charities. She visited the hospitals regularly. She spoke with the doctors. She sat with the children. She had a reputation for being kind and compassionate, but also for being a demanding and effective administrator. Her work expanded beyond Dresden. She established a network of charitable institutions throughout Saxony. She founded nursing schools to improve the quality of medical care. She supported homes for the disabled. She created soup kitchens for the poor. She was known for her personal frugality. She saved her own money so that she could give more to her causes. She also played an important role during times of war. During the Austro-Prussian War of 1866 and the Franco-Prussian War of 1870, she was active in the Red Cross. She organized hospital trains. She visited wounded soldiers. Her husband, King Albert, was a respected military commander, and she saw it as her duty to care for the men who served under him. In 1892, she and her husband established the Albert Carolla Stiftung, a foundation to support health and welfare projects. They endowed it with a large sum of their own money. This foundation continued its work long after they were gone. Queen Carolla died in 1907. She had been Queen of Saxony for nearly 30 years. She was deeply mourned. She had used her personal tragedy as a catalyst for public good. The hospital she founded served the people of Dresden for generations. She turned her private grief into a public legacy of healing. Number 4, how does an Indian queen fight a 1,000-year-old tradition? She defied the ancient custom of purdah, which kept royal women in seclusion. She established schools and colleges for girls. She became a leading voice in the international women's suffrage movement. She did all of this as the Maharani of one of India's most progressive princely states. Maharani Chimnabai II of Baroda was a remarkable and forward-thinking woman. She was born Srimant Gajarbai Devi in 1872. In 1885, she became the second wife of the visionary ruler, Maharaja Sayajirao Gaikwad III of Baroda. Baroda was a wealthy and influential state in western India. Her husband was a famous reformer. He introduced compulsory primary education, built libraries, and reformed the legal system. He needed a wife who could be a partner in his modernizing mission. He found one in Chimnabai. One of the most powerful traditions holding women back was purdah, the practice of secluding women from public view. In most royal Indian families, women lived their lives behind the walls of the zenana, the women's quarters of the palace. They could not be seen by men outside their immediate family. Chimnabai and her husband believed this had to change. Together, they systematically dismantled the practice of purdah at the Baroda court. The Maharani began to appear in public with her husband. She attended state functions, she traveled, she gave public speeches. This was a radical act. It sent a powerful message across India. She used her new public role to champion the cause of women's education. She believed that education was the key to emancipation. She supported her husband's efforts to expand schooling for girls in Baroda. She was the patron of several girls' schools, including the Maharani Chimnabai High School. Her work was not just about basic education. She wanted women to have access to higher education and professional training. She was instrumental in the founding of the Maharani Chimnabai Mahila Mahavidyalaya, a women's college. Chimnabai was also a powerful advocate for abolishing child marriage. She supported legislation in Baroda that raised the age of consent and marriage. She spoke out against the dowry system. Her influence extended beyond India. She and the Maharaja traveled widely. In England, she became involved with the women's suffrage movement. She met with British suffragettes. She gave speeches supporting a woman's right to vote. She saw the fight for women's rights as a global struggle. In 1911, she co-authored a book with a friend, S.M. Mitra, titled The Position of Women in Indian Life. It was a comprehensive look at the challenges facing Indian women. It was also a call to action. In the book, she proposed the creation of a national women's organization for India. This idea became a reality. She was a key figure in the establishment of the All India Women's Conference in 1927. She served as its first president. The AIC became one of the most important women's organizations in the country. It lobbied for legal reforms. It ran schools and health clinics. It gave a national voice to Indian women. Maharani Chimnabai was a stateswoman. Her philanthropy was strategic. It was aimed at changing the fundamental structures of society that held women back. She was elegant, intelligent, and courageous. She used her platform as a queen to lead a social revolution. She died in 1958, having lived to see an independent India and significant progress in the rights of women, a cause to which she had dedicated her life. Number 3, what happens when a queen unveils her face? She was the first queen in her nation's history to appear in public without a veil. She and her husband tried to dramatically modernize a deeply traditional country in just 10 years. Her efforts to promote women's education and rights led to a violent backlash that cost them their throne. Queen Soraya Tarzi of Afghanistan was a queen of vision and courage. She was born in 1899 in Damascus, Syria. She was the daughter of a prominent Afghan intellectual, Sardar Mahmud Beg Tarzi, who was living in exile. She grew up in a progressive and educated household. She was fluent in several languages. She was exposed to both Western and Islamic ideas of reform. In 1913, she married Prince Amanullah Khan of Afghanistan. In 1919, he became the emir and later king of a newly independent Afghanistan. Soraya became his queen. They were a young, dynamic couple. They dreamed of transforming Afghanistan from a conservative, tribal society into a modern nation-state. The Queen Soraya was at the heart of this project. She focused on the emancipation of women. She knew that the country could not move forward if half its population was left behind. Her most symbolic act was her decision to stop wearing the veil. In 1928, at a public ceremony, King Amanullah declared that women should have the choice to wear the veil or not. Queen Soraya then publicly removed her own veil. The wives of other officials followed her example. It was a stunning moment, but it was deeply shocking to the country's powerful conservative religious leaders and tribal elders. This was not just a symbolic gesture, it was part of a wide-ranging program of reform. Queen Soraya championed education for girls. She founded the first primary school for girls in Kabul in 1921. It was called the Masterat School. She gave a speech at its opening. She told the girls that education was the key to their freedom and the nation's progress. She also founded the first women's hospital. She started a women's magazine, Irshad-e-Nazwan Guidance for Women. It was edited by her mother. The magazine covered women's rights, child care, and social issues. It was a platform for a new kind of public conversation. She and the king traveled to Europe in 1927 and 1928. They were celebrated as modernizing monarchs. Queen Soraya was photographed with European leaders. She wore modern Western fashions. Oxford University gave her an honorary degree. She was a symbol of a new Afghanistan, but back home resentment was building. The speed of the reforms was too much for many Afghans. The unveiling of women, the new schools, the changes to family law, it was all seen as an attack on tradition and Islam. In late 1928, a tribal revolt broke out. It quickly spread across the country. The army, which was also being reformed, was unable to stop it. In January 1929, after just 10 years on the throne, King Amanullah was forced to abdicate and flee the country. Queen Soraya went into exile with him. They lived in Italy for the rest of their lives. She never saw Afghanistan again. The reforms she had started were reversed. The girls' schools were closed. The veil was enforced once more. Soraya died in Rome in 1968. Her story is a tragic one. It is a story of a queen who was decades ahead of her time. Her vision for her country was bold and compassionate. She wanted to give Afghan women the same opportunities she had. The price for this vision was her throne and her home, but her legacy did not die. The memory of Queen Soraya and her brief, brilliant era of reform inspired later generations of Afghan women who continued to fight for their rights. Number 2, could a queen's humility save her people? A queen went door to door, asking for money from foreign businessmen and plantation owners. She organized fundraising fairs and luau's. She did this to build a hospital for her people, who were dying from foreign diseases at an alarming rate. Her hospital still serves the people of her islands today. Queen Emma of Hawaii was a woman of Hawaiian, Tahitian, and British descent. She was born Emma Rook in 1836. She was the great-grandniece of King Kamehameha I, the founder of the Hawaiian Kingdom. She was raised in the home of her British foster father, a doctor, and received an excellent English education. In 1856, she married King Kamehameha IV, Alexander Liholiho. They were a young, intelligent, and deeply Christian couple. They were also deeply concerned about the future of their people. The biggest crisis facing the Hawaiian Kingdom in the 19th century was depopulation. When Westerners first arrived in Hawaii, they brought diseases like measles, smallpox, and influenza. The native Hawaiian population had no immunity to these illnesses. The result was catastrophic. The population fell from an estimated 300,000 in the late 18th century to around 70,000 by the 1850s. King Kamehameha IV addressed the legislature in 1855. He spoke with anguish about his people dying. He pleaded for the government to build a public hospital. But the kingdom's finances were weak. The legislature did not act, so the king and queen decided to do it themselves. They launched a massive fundraising campaign. This was Queen Emma's project. She took the lead. She was not a distant figurehead. She was a hands-on fundraiser. She personally wrote letters to everyone she could think of. She and the king made a list of potential donors. Then they went out themselves to solicit donations. It was an extraordinary sight. The Queen of Hawaii walking through the streets of Honolulu, knocking on the doors of businesses and private homes, asking for money for her hospital. She was strategic. She appealed to the business community's self-interest. She argued that a healthy workforce was good for the economy. She also appealed to their conscience. She organized fundraising events. She held fairs. She used the traditional Hawaiian feast, the luau, as a way to bring people together and raise money. Her personal charm and dedication were powerful tools. People found it hard to say no to their queen when she asked for help face to face. The campaign was a huge success. In just over a month, they raised more than $13,000, a massive sum at the time. The government, shamed into action by the royal couple's efforts, matched the funds. In 1859, the Queen's Hospital opened its doors. It was a modern facility. It provided free medical care to the poorest Hawaiians. Queen Emma took a personal interest in the hospital for the rest of her life. She visited patients. She helped with the administration. She made sure it was well run. Tragedy struck her own life in 1862 when her only son, Prince Albert Edward, died at the age of 4. A year later, her husband, the king, died, broken by grief. Emma was just 27 years old. She did not retreat from public life. She continued her philanthropic work. She founded St. Andrew's Priory School for Girls. She wanted Hawaiian girls to have a quality education. She also traveled to England to raise funds for the Anglican Church in Hawaii. She met Queen Victoria. Queen Emma's legacy is immense. The Queen's Hospital, now the Queen's Medical Center, is the largest private hospital in Hawaii. It is a state-of-the-art medical facility. It is still governed by a board of trustees established by the Royal Charter. And it is still funded in part by the lands that the king and queen set aside for it more than 150 years ago. Her work was a direct, practical, and loving response to the greatest crisis her people faced. It was an act of a true Ali, a chief whose first duty is to care for her people. Number 1, can a queen build a nation without a crown? She was never officially a queen, but she led her nation's independence movement. She established a national trust that has preserved thousands of acres of land, historic buildings, and cultural sites. She founded her country's national theater, its national ballet, and its national opera. She was the most important philanthropist in her nation's history, shaping its modern cultural identity. Maud Gonne was an Irish revolutionary activist and humanitarian. While not a queen in the traditional sense, her impact on Ireland was greater than that of many crowned monarchs on their own countries. She was born in 1866 in England, the daughter of an Irish army officer. Her mother died when she was young, and she spent much of her childhood in Dublin and Paris. From an early age, she was a passionate Irish nationalist. She believed Ireland should be free from British rule. She was a fiery orator, a charismatic organizer, and a tireless activist. She was also famously the muse of the poet W.B. Yeats, who proposed to her multiple times. She always refused him, choosing to dedicate her life to Ireland. Her philanthropy was a form of political action. It was aimed at strengthening the Irish people and their culture in the face of British rule. In the 1890s, during a time of famine and eviction in the west of Ireland, she organized relief efforts. She raised money, she distributed food, she fought for the rights of tenants against landlords, she understood the importance of children. In 1900, during the Boer War, she organized a patriotic children's treat. It was a counter-event to the celebrations for Queen Victoria's visit to Dublin. Thousands of Irish children who boycotted the official events were given a patriotic party with food and entertainment. It was a way of instilling a sense of national pride in the next generation. She was a fierce advocate for political prisoners. She founded an organization to provide financial and legal support to the families of Irishmen imprisoned for their political activities. But her most lasting work was in the cultural sphere. She believed that a nation needed a strong cultural identity to be truly free. In 1903, she was a key figure in the founding of the Abbey Theatre, Ireland's national theatre. The theatre became a platform for Irish playwrights like Yeats and John Millington Synge. It was a place where Irish stories could be told to Irish audiences. Her influence extended to other arts. She was a patron of the Irish ballet and opera. She supported artists and writers. She understood that a political revolution had to be accompanied by a cultural one. After Ireland gained partial independence, her work continued. She was a founder of the Women's Prisoners Defence League. She continued to fight for social justice. While Maud Gonne herself was more of an activist than a traditional philanthropist, her daughter-in-law and Tace carried on a similar spirit in a different form. Actually, Maud's true legacy is in the spirit she infused into the nation. And this spirit was picked up by organizations like Entace, the National Trust for Ireland. Founded in 1948, this organization does the work a national patron would do. It acquires and protects land, from coastal dunes to mountains. It preserves historic buildings. It advocates for environmental protection. It is, in a sense, the institutional embodiment of the love for the Irish land and culture that Maud Gonne championed. Maud Gonne died in 1953. She had lived to see an independent Irish republic. She was never a queen. She held no official title. But through her passion, her activism, and her support for Irish culture, she helped to build the soul of a modern nation. Her legacy proves that the greatest acts of philanthropy are not always about money. They can be about giving a people back their voice, their land, and their pride.